A tiny green alien changed the way millions of people think about success with just 8 words. When you hear them for the first time, they sound almost too simple to matter. Luke Skywalker was stuck in the swamps of Dagobah with his spaceship sinking into the mud. He told his new teacher Yoda that he would give it a try. That's when the ancient Jedi Master dropped the wisdom that would echo through generations. Do or do not. There is no try. At first it sounds harsh. Most of us were raised to believe that trying is what counts. Your parents probably told you that as long as you tried your best, that was enough. Teachers gave you credit for effort even when you got the wrong answer. But Yoda was teaching Luke something completely different. The old master wasn't being mean or impossible to please. He was explaining how the Force actually works. When you approach something thinking you'll just try, you've already planted the seeds of failure in your mind. You're giving yourself an out before you even start. Think about it this way. When you sit down in a chair, you don't try to sit, you just sit. When you pick up a glass of water, you don't try to pick it up, you simply do it. The action flows naturally because you believe completely that it will work. That's what Yoda wanted Luke to understand. A Jedi can't afford to hedge their bets or hold back. When you're using the Force to lift a spaceship out of a swamp, doubt becomes your enemy. The moment you think it might not work, it won't. Luke learned this the hard way. He stood at the edge of the swamp, reached out his hand, and tried to pull his X-Wing fighter from the murky water. The ship moved a little, then sank back down. Luke collapsed, exhausted and frustrated. He had tried his hardest and failed. That's when Yoda showed him what doing looked like. The tiny master closed his eyes, stretched out his 3-fingered hand, and the massive starfighter rose smoothly from the swamp. Water streamed off its hull as it floated through the air and settled gently on solid ground. Luke couldn't believe it. The ship was huge, probably 100 times heavier than the rocks he'd been practicing with. But Yoda just shrugged. Size means nothing to the Force. The only difference between moving a pebble and moving a mountain is in your mind. This wasn't just some lesson Yoda made up on the spot. He'd been living by this principle for 900 years. When the Clone Wars erupted across the galaxy, Yoda didn't try to protect the Republic. He did it. When he faced the Emperor in their final battle, he didn't try to stop the Sith Lord. He committed completely to the fight. Even in his teaching, Yoda followed his own advice. He didn't try to train Jedi. He trained them. Over the centuries, countless students passed through his instruction. Some became great knights. Others fell to the dark side. But Yoda never held back or gave less than everything to each student. The lesson goes beyond just Force powers or lightsaber combat. It's about how we approach everything in life. When you tell yourself you'll try to get that job, you're already preparing for rejection. When you say you'll try to learn that skill, you're giving yourself permission to quit when it gets hard. But when you decide to do something, really do it, everything changes. Your mind stops looking for excuses and starts looking for solutions. Obstacles become puzzles to solve rather than reasons to stop. Failure becomes feedback rather than an ending. That's why Yoda's words hit so hard. He's not telling Luke to be perfect or never fail. He's telling him to stop sabotaging himself before he starts. Either commit fully to lifting that ship or don't bother reaching out your hand. Half measures lead to half results. The crazy thing is that when Luke finally got it, when he truly believed, he became one of the most powerful Jedi ever. He rebuilt the entire Jedi Order from nothing. He turned Darth Vader, the most feared villain in the galaxy, back to the light. He did things that seemed impossible because he stopped trying and started doing. 900 years of wisdom boiled down to 8 words. Do or do not. There is no try. It sounds simple because it is simple. The hard part is actually living it. Two old enemies meet in the desert for the last time, and one of them explains why the other spent his whole life chasing nothing. The lesson Obi-Wan Kenobi taught Darth Maul that day might be the most important truth about power ever spoken. Picture this. Maul has spent decades hunting Obi-Wan across the galaxy. He's fueled by rage, obsessed with revenge for being cut in half all those years ago. He finally tracks the old Jedi to Tatooine, where they face each other under the twin suns. Maul expects a grand battle, a chance to finally prove his superiority. Instead, Obi-Wan gives him something far more devastating than any lightsaber strike. He tells him the truth. If you define yourself by the power to take life, the desire to dominate, to possess, then you have nothing. These words cut deeper than any weapon because they exposed what Maul's entire existence had become. Empty. All that anger, all that strength, all those years of plotting and scheming, and what did he have to show for it? Absolutely nothing. Obi-Wan knew this truth better than anyone because he'd watched it play out with his own apprentice. He'd seen Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, the hero of the Clone Wars, throw everything away for the promise of power. Anakin thought controlling life and death would save the woman he loved. Instead, his grab for power destroyed everything he cared about. But Obi-Wan took a different path. After losing his master Qui-Gon, after watching Anakin fall, after the Jedi Order collapsed around him, he could have turned bitter. He had every reason to seek revenge against the Sith who ruined his life. He was skilled enough to become a terrible force of vengeance if he wanted. He chose something else entirely. For nearly 20 years, Obi-Wan lived alone in the desert watching over a farm boy who didn't even know he existed. No glory, no recognition, no thanks. Just quiet protection of someone who might one day save the galaxy. That was how Obi-Wan defined himself. Not by what he could destroy, but by what he chose to protect. Think about the difference between these two warriors. Maul spent those same decades building criminal empires, taking lives, spreading fear. He accumulated power the way some people collect trophies, but every victory left him feeling emptier than before. No amount of domination could fill the hole inside him. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan lived in a cave. He had no army, no wealth, no empire. By Maul's standards, he had nothing. But Obi-Wan had something Maul could never understand. He had purpose. He had peace. He had chosen to be a guardian rather than a conqueror. This wasn't just philosophy for Obi-Wan. He lived it every single day. During the Clone Wars, he was one of the Republic's greatest generals, but he never forgot that his job was to protect people, not destroy enemies. He was famous for trying to negotiate peaceful solutions even in the middle of battles. Other Jedi would reach for their lightsabers while Obi-Wan was still talking, still trying to find a way that didn't involve violence. Even his fighting style reflected this truth. Obi-Wan mastered Form 3, the most defensive of all lightsaber techniques. It was all about protecting yourself and others, turning your opponent's aggression against them. He didn't attack. He simply refused to be defeated. He let his enemies tire themselves out, trying to break through his defense. The ultimate proof came on the Death Star. When Obi-Wan faced Vader for the last time, he could have fought to the end. He was still dangerous enough to give Vader a real battle. But he saw Luke watching, saw the future standing there, and made a choice. He lowered his lightsaber and let Vader strike him down. In that moment, by choosing sacrifice over survival, Obi-Wan became more powerful than Vader could imagine. Not powerful in the way the Sith understand it. He couldn't shoot lightning or choke people with his mind. But he became a guide, a voice of wisdom that would help Luke when he needed it most. That's what Obi-Wan was trying to tell Maul in the desert. Real strength doesn't come from taking, it comes from giving. Real power doesn't come from controlling others, it comes from controlling yourself. The person who needs to dominate everyone around them is actually the weakest person in the room, because they're ruled by their own fear and anger. When their final duel came, it lasted 3 moves. 3 moves to end a rivalry that had spanned decades. Maul fell, and Obi-Wan caught him, held him gently as he passed. Even then, even after everything Maul had done, Obi-Wan showed compassion. He told his old enemy that Luke would avenge them both, that the Chosen One would bring balance. Maul spent his life taking and ended with nothing. Obi-Wan spent his life giving and left behind everything that mattered. A new hope for the galaxy, protected and prepared for the moment when he would be needed most. A 9-year-old boy sits nervously before the Jedi Council, terrified about his future. The tall Jedi Master beside him leans down and shares 5 words that would echo through the boy's entire life, both as a hero and as a villain. Your focus determines your reality. Qui-Gon Jinn didn't talk like other Jedi. While they quoted ancient texts and spoke in riddles, he cut straight to practical truth. This wasn't some mystical force philosophy that took years to understand. It was simple. Whatever you put your attention on becomes your world. Young Anakin was drowning in doubt that day. He'd left his mother behind, faced a room full of stern Jedi Masters who clearly didn't want him there and had no idea what would happen next. His mind was spinning with worst-case scenarios. That's when Qui-Gon stepped in with advice that was both obvious and revolutionary. The thing about Qui-Gon was that he actually lived this way. Other Jedi would stress about the future, worry about the past, get tangled up in what might happen or what should have happened. Not Qui-Gon. He stayed locked into the present moment like his life depended on it. During the Trade Federation blockade of Naboo, while everyone else panicked about political consequences and galactic war, Qui-Gon focused on the immediate problem. Get the Queen to safety. Find a way off the planet. Deal with what's in front of you right now. His reality stayed manageable because he refused to let his focus drift to things he couldn't control. This drove Obi-Wan crazy when he was Qui-Gon's apprentice. They'd be in the middle of aggressive negotiations with battle droids pointing blasters at them, and Qui-Gon would calmly sip his tea and study the situation. Obi-Wan would be thinking about 20 different ways this could go wrong. Qui-Gon would be thinking about the temperature of his tea. But here's why it worked. When you're focused on fear, you make fearful decisions. When you're focused on problems, you create more problems. Qui-Gon understood that your mind builds your world from whatever raw materials you give it. Take the pod race on Tatooine. Everyone thought it was insane to bet everything on a 9-year-old human who'd never even finished a race before. The odds were impossible. The danger was real. Sebulba, the champion, literally tried to destroy other racers for fun. Qui-Gon's focus never wavered. He didn't see an impossible situation. He saw a Force-sensitive boy with supernatural reflexes who just needed someone to believe in him. While others focused on everything that could go wrong, Qui-Gon focused on the one way it could go right. Guess which reality came true? Even facing Darth Maul on Naboo showed this principle in action. Here was the first Sith Lord anyone had seen in 1,000 years, wielding a double-bladed lightsaber with terrifying skill. Most Jedi would have been overwhelmed by the implications. The Sith had returned. Everything was about to change. The galaxy was in danger. Qui-Gon just fought the man in front of him. No wasted energy on what this meant for the future. No distraction about how this was possible. Just pure presence in the moment. When those energy barriers separated them during the duel, Qui-Gon didn't pace or panic. He knelt down and meditated, keeping his focus exactly where he needed it. The tragic part is what happened to Anakin when he forgot this lesson. As he grew older, his focus shifted to his fears. He fixated on visions of Padme suffering. He obsessed over becoming powerful enough to stop death itself. His reality became darker and darker because that's where he pointed his attention. Every nightmare he focused on came true, not because the Force was punishing him, but because he was creating that reality with his own choices. His fear of losing Padme led to actions that caused her death. His focus on gaining power cost him everything that mattered. Qui-Gon's simple wisdom could have saved him, but by then it was too late. The Council never really understood Qui-Gon's approach. They thought he was reckless, too willing to ignore the bigger picture. They couldn't see that he wasn't ignoring anything. He was choosing what deserved his focus. While they worried about maintaining 1,000-year-old traditions, he focused on the living Force speaking to him in each moment. That's why Qui-Gon was the first Jedi to figure out immortality through the Force. Everyone else was so focused on the physical world, on winning wars and playing politics. Qui-Gon focused on the deeper reality beyond death itself. He found it because he looked for it. His reality expanded because that's where he pointed his attention. When Qui-Gon died in Obi-Wan's arms, his last words weren't about revenge or regret. He stayed focused on what mattered. Train the boy. Promise me. Even dying, he kept his attention on the reality he wanted to create, one where Anakin would become a Jedi. The proof of this teaching shows up everywhere in Star Wars. Luke succeeded because he focused on the good in his father when everyone else saw only evil. The heroes win when they focus on hope. They lose when they focus on fear. Qui-Gon gave Anakin the key to everything in those 5 words. Your focus determines your reality, not the Force, not destiny, not other people. Your focus. You get to choose what world you live in by choosing where you point your attention. Most of us learn this too late, if we learn it at all. The galaxy was about to explode into war, and the most powerful Jedi Master in the Order had to remind everyone what they were supposed to be. Mace Windu's words to Chancellor Palpatine weren't just a statement. They were a warning about what happens when Guardians become warriors. We are keepers of the peace, not soldiers. Simple words that held 10,000 years of Jedi wisdom. But even as Mace spoke them, he could feel that wisdom slipping away. The Republic needed an army, the Senate demanded action, and the Jedi were being pulled into something they were never meant to be. Think about what the Jedi had been for millennia. They were negotiators who showed up to prevent conflicts before they started. They were mediators who helped enemies find common ground. They carried lightsabers, sure, but those were meant to be symbols of justice, not weapons of war. A Jedi's greatest victory was ending a dispute without anyone getting hurt. Mace Windu embodied this principle better than most. He'd developed his own fighting style called Varpad, which was all about turning an opponent's aggression back on them. He didn't attack. He redirected. He took negative energy and transformed it into something else. That's what peacekeepers do. They don't create violence. They stop it. But the Clone Wars changed everything. Suddenly, the Jedi weren't showing up to negotiate. They were leading clone troopers into battle. They weren't mediating between enemies. They were choosing sides. The Guardians of Peace had become generals of war, and Mace knew how dangerous that was. Here's the thing about being a soldier versus being a peacekeeper. Soldiers are trained to defeat enemies. They think in terms of victory and defeat, us versus them. Peacekeepers think differently. They see conflict itself as the enemy. Their job isn't to win, it's to make the fighting stop. Mace watched his fellow Jedi struggle with this transformation. Young knights who'd been trained to preserve life were suddenly being asked to take it. Padawans who should have been learning diplomacy were learning battle tactics instead. The whole order was being twisted into something it was never supposed to be. You could see it in how the war progressed. At first, the Jedi tried to maintain their principles. They accepted surrenders, protected civilians, minimized casualties whenever possible. But war has a way of grinding down principles. Each battle made them a little harder, a little more willing to do whatever it took to win. The really twisted part was that Palpatine knew exactly what he was doing. Every time he praised the Jedi as military leaders, every time he gave them more authority over the war effort, he was corrupting what they stood for. He was turning peacekeepers into soldiers because soldiers are easier to destroy. You can defeat an army. You can't defeat an ideal. Mace saw this happening, but felt powerless to stop it. The Republic needed defending. Lives were at stake. How could the Jedi stand aside while worlds burned? But every battle they fought took them further from their true purpose. They were winning the war and losing themselves. The perfect example was what happened with Ahsoka Tano. She was trained as a soldier from day one, thrown into battle as a teenager. She was good at it too, maybe too good. But when she was framed for an attack on the Jedi Temple, the Order abandoned her. They'd become so focused on the war that they forgot their duty to their own. Mace himself struggled with this contradiction every day. He'd sit in the council chambers making military decisions, deploying Jedi like pieces on a game board. Then he'd remember his own words. Keepers of the peace, not soldiers. The gap between what they were supposed to be and what they'd become grew wider with each passing month. When reports came in about Jedi becoming too aggressive, too quick to fight rather than talk, Mace would remind them of the old ways. But his words sounded hollow when he was sending them right back to the battlefield. How can you be a peacekeeper when you're surrounded by war? The breaking point came when Mace discovered Palpatine was the Sith Lord they'd been looking for. Here was the chance to end the war with one decisive action. All those battles, all that suffering, it could stop if he just struck down one man. For a moment, Mace forgot his own teaching. He raised his lightsaber not as a keeper of the peace, but as a soldier determined to destroy the enemy. That moment of forgetting cost everything. The Jedi Order fell. The Republic became the Empire. The peacekeepers were scattered or destroyed. All because they'd allowed themselves to become something they were never meant to be. The tragedy of Mace Windu's story is that he was right all along. The Jedi were supposed to be keepers of the peace. The moment they became soldiers, they'd already lost. Not the war, but something much more important. They'd lost their purpose, their identity, the very thing that made them Jedi. His words echo through history as both a reminder and a warning. When guardians become warriors, when protectors become conquerors, when peacekeepers become soldiers, something vital is lost. The methods we use shape who we become. Fight too many battles, and you forget how to make peace. Mace Windu knew this truth. He spoke it clearly. He just couldn't stop it from being forgotten when the galaxy needed it most. But his words remain, waiting for future generations to remember that true strength comes not from winning wars, but from preventing them in the first place. A former Jedi stands before a group of rebels who barely know her name, and she explains her entire philosophy in one sentence. When Ahsoka Tano spoke these words in Star Wars Rebels, she wasn't making a grand speech. She was just stating a fact about how she lived. The simplicity of it catches you off guard. No complex moral equations, no weighing pros and cons, no asking what's in it for her. Someone needs help? You help them. End of discussion. This wasn't something Ahsoka learned in the Jedi Temple. Sure, they taught compassion and service there, but they also taught detachment and following council orders. They had rules about when to help and how to help and who deserved help. Ahsoka's approach was different. She stripped away all the bureaucracy and got to the core of what mattered. Think about how she got to this point. Ahsoka was trained as a Padawan during wartime, thrown into battle as a teenager. She learned the official Jedi way of doing things: follow protocol, obey the council, trust the system. Then the system betrayed her. She was framed for something she didn't do, and the order she'd devoted her life to turned its back on her. Most people would have become bitter after that. They'd have good reason to stop caring about others. If the institution that was supposed to represent good could fail so badly, why bother trying to help anyone? But Ahsoka went the opposite direction. She realized that helping people had nothing to do with institutions or orders or official approval. It was just the right thing to do. After leaving the Order, Ahsoka could have disappeared, lived quietly somewhere safe. Instead, she became Fulcrum, secretly coordinating rebel cells across the galaxy. No recognition, no glory, just countless lives saved because she couldn't walk away from people in trouble. The beauty of Ahsoka's philosophy is that it removes all the excuses we usually make. We tell ourselves we're too busy, too tired, not qualified enough, not strong enough. We say it's someone else's problem, or the situation is too complicated, or helping might make things worse. Ahsoka's response to all of that: doesn't matter, you help anyway. During the Clone Wars, she lived this truth constantly. When she found a group of younglings trapped on a pirate ship, she didn't calculate the odds or wait for backup. She helped them. When she discovered corruption on Mandalore, she didn't worry about political implications. She fought to protect innocent people. Every choice flowed from that same simple principle. But here's what makes this teaching so powerful. It's not about being a hero or saving the galaxy. It's about the small moments. The person who drops something and needs a hand. the stranger who looks lost, the co-worker struggling with a task. Most of us will never fight Imperial Inquisitors or lead rebel missions, but we face these small opportunities to help every single day. Ahsoka understood that each act of helping creates ripples. The people you help might help others. The kindness you show might inspire someone to be kinder. You'll never know the full impact, and that's not the point. The point is to help because helping is what decent people do. When she says these words in Rebels, she's talking to Ezra and the Ghost Crew, people who are risking everything to fight the Empire. They want to know why she does it, what drives her to keep fighting when the odds are so terrible. Her answer is almost frustratingly simple. This is just who she is. She finds people who need help, and she helps them. The no matter what part is crucial. It means no matter the risk, no matter the cost, no matter if they're strangers or enemies or people who might not deserve it. During the final season of Clone Wars, Ahsoka even tried to save clone troopers who were actively trying to eliminate her during Order 66. They were programmed to attack her, but they still needed help. So she helped them. This philosophy gave Ahsoka something the Jedi Order couldn't: freedom. She didn't need permission to do good. She didn't need to check with a council or follow a code. She saw suffering and acted to stop it. She saw need and moved to fill it. Every choice became simple when filtered through this lens. The lesson hits different when you realize Ahsoka had every reason to stop caring. Betrayed by the Jedi, hunted by the Empire, constantly in danger, she could have justified looking out for herself. Instead, she doubled down on helping others. Not because anyone told her to, not because she'd get rewarded, but because that's who she chose to be. There's something liberating about this approach. It removes the paralysis of overthinking. Should I help? Can I help? What if something goes wrong? Ahsoka would say you're asking the wrong questions. The only question that matters is whether someone needs help. If yes, you help them, no matter what. This isn't about guilt or obligation. Ahsoka doesn't help people because she has to. She helps them because she's decided that's the kind of person she wants to be. Every day, through every action, she defines herself by this choice. Not by her past, not by what others think of her, but by her decision to help whenever she can. That's a choice available to all of us, right now, today. We can decide to be people who help no matter what. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient, not when we feel like it. Always. It's simultaneously the simplest and hardest philosophy to live by. Simple because it removes all ambiguity about what to do. Hard because it demands we act when every excuse tells us not to. Ahsoka proved you don't need to be part of something bigger to make a difference. You don't need permission or authority or even resources. You just need to see someone who needs help and decide to help them. Do that enough times and you become someone who matters, someone who leaves the world better than you found it. A man watches his student fall into an endless pit, thinks he's lost everything, and in that moment of total despair, discovers the truth that changes his entire life. When Kanan Jarrus speaks these words to the Grand Inquisitor in Rebels Season 1, he's not just winning a lightsaber duel. He's winning a battle he's been fighting since he was a child. Fear had owned Kanan for most of his life. Not the regular kind of fear everyone feels, but the deep bone-level terror that comes from watching your entire world get destroyed when you're too young to understand why. He was just a kid when Order 66 happened, when the clone troopers turned on the Jedi. when his master sacrificed herself so he could escape. That kind of trauma doesn't just go away. For years, Kanan hid, changed his name, buried his lightsaber, pretended to be nobody special. Every day he woke up afraid that someone would discover what he was. Every night he went to sleep wondering if tomorrow would be the day they found him. Fear wasn't just something he felt, it was how he lived. Then he met Ezra, this kid with raw force abilities who needed training. Suddenly, Kanan had to be something he'd never thought he'd be again. A Jedi. Not just any Jedi, but a teacher. How do you teach courage when you're terrified? How do you inspire hope when you're drowning in doubt? The Grand Inquisitor knew exactly where to strike. This former Jedi temple guard turned dark side hunter had made a career out of breaking people with fear. He knew Kanan's history, knew about the scared little Padawan who never finished his training. During their duel on that Imperial ship, he picked Kanan apart piece by piece, physically and mentally. Then came the moment that broke everything open. Ezra fell. Kanan watched his student plummet into what looked like certain death, and something inside him shattered. But here's the thing about shattering. Sometimes it lets the light in. Standing there, believing he'd failed completely, Kanan finally understood something. The fear had always been there. It would always be there. But there was something else too. Something that had kept him going all those years. Something that made him pick up his lightsaber again. Something that led him to train Ezra despite his doubts. The Force. Not the Force as some abstract concept or mystical energy field. The Force as connection, as purpose, as the thing that binds all living beings together. The Force that had saved him as a child, guided him through years of hiding, brought him to his crew, his family, his student. It had always been stronger than his fear. He just hadn't been able to see it. Now I know there's something stronger than fear, far stronger. When Kanan speaks these words, you can hear the amazement in his voice, like he's discovering water after years in the desert. The fear is still there, but it doesn't matter anymore because he's found something more powerful to hold on to. The transformation is immediate. The man who'd been getting destroyed moments before suddenly fights with perfect clarity. Every move flows naturally. The Grand Inquisitor's taunts bounce off him like rain. Kanan isn't trying to win anymore. He's just following the Force, and the Force leads him to victory. The Inquisitor falls, defeated by someone he'd dismissed as a failed Padawan. But Kanan didn't beat him with superior skill or training. He beat him by choosing trust over terror, connection over isolation, the Force over fear. This truth shaped everything that came after for Kanan. When they faced Darth Vader, an opponent that should have paralyzed him with terror, Kanan stood his ground. When the Empire attacked his friends, when everything seemed hopeless, he remembered, there's something stronger than fear. The lesson goes deeper than just facing danger. Fear stops us from trying new things, from connecting with people, from becoming who we're meant to be. It whispers that we're not good enough, not strong enough, that we'll fail and everyone will see. Fear makes us small. But Kanan discovered that when you trust in something bigger than yourself, whether you call it the Force or love or faith or community, fear loses its power. Not because the scary things stop being scary, but because you're no longer facing them alone. You're connected to something that transcends your individual terror. Think about what this means practically. When Kanan had to train Ezra, he was terrified of being a bad teacher, but he trusted the Force to guide him. When he fell in love with Hera, he was afraid of the vulnerability, but he trusted that connection was stronger than isolation. When he faced his final sacrifice, he was surely afraid, but he trusted that his choice would protect those he loved. The Force in Kanan's understanding isn't about moving rocks with your mind or seeing the future. It's about recognizing that we're all connected, that we're part of something larger than our individual fears and failures. When you truly understand that, when you trust it completely, fear becomes just another emotion rather than a prison. Kanan started as Caleb Doom, a terrified child running from Order 66. He became Kanan Jarrus, a man who could face the Empire's worst enforcers without flinching. Not because he stopped feeling fear, but because he found something stronger to believe in. That's the gift of his discovery. Fear is real. Fear is powerful. Fear is sometimes even helpful. But fear is not the strongest force in the universe. Connection is stronger. Purpose is stronger. Love is stronger. The Force, however you understand it, is stronger. When life gets overwhelming, when terror threatens to paralyze you, remember Kanan in that moment of despair, discovering that his greatest fear had come true and finding out it didn't destroy him. Because there was something stronger than fear. There always had been. He just had to stop running long enough to feel it. A Jedi Master floats in the vacuum of space with 3 clone troopers, their escape pod destroyed, their oxygen running out, and no rescue in sight. The clones start talking about how they're expendable, just numbers bred to fight and perish. That's when Plo Koon says something that changes everything. Not to me. This moment captures everything about who Plo Koon was and why his words about adversity hit so hard. He didn't just talk about perseverance. He lived it, breathed it, and made sure everyone around him understood that giving up was never an option. Not because of duty or orders, but because every life, every struggle, every moment of resistance mattered. If all who face adversity surrendered to it, nothing of value would remain. Think about what he's really saying here. Every good thing we have, every comfort, every freedom, every small joy exists because someone before us refused to give up when things got hard. The Republic existed because people fought for it. The Jedi Order survived for thousands of years because masters like Plo Koon refused to let adversity win. But Plo Koon wasn't talking about grand galactic struggles. He was talking about the personal battles we all face. The moment when you want to quit, when the pressure feels unbearable, when it would be so much easier to just stop trying. That's when this truth matters most. During the Clone Wars, Plo Koon saw adversity everywhere. Friends falling in battle, the Jedi being forced into roles they weren't meant for, the Republic slowly corrupting itself from within. Lesser beings would have become cynical or bitter. Plo Koon became kinder. When his fleet was destroyed by a new separatist weapon, leaving him and 3 clones drifting in space, the smart move would have been to accept their fate. They had minutes of air left, no distress signal, no way to call for help. The odds of rescue were basically 0. The clones started talking about how they were just expendable assets, bred to be thrown away. This is where Plo Koon's philosophy shined brightest. He told them they weren't expendable to him. He kept their spirits up, kept them fighting to survive even when survival seemed impossible. And because they didn't surrender to their adversity, because they held on just a little longer, Ahsoka and Anakin found them. That's the thing about adversity. It lies to you. It tells you that giving up is logical, that resistance is pointless, that you're too small or weak or unimportant to make a difference. Plo Koon understood that adversity is a test, not of your strength, but of your commitment to what matters. Look at how he trained Ahsoka Tano. She was young, eager, sometimes reckless. He could have been harsh with her, demanded perfection, criticized her mistakes. Instead, he encouraged her through every setback. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of her worth. When she faced challenges that seemed too big, he stood beside her until she found her own strength. This approach came from his deep understanding that adversity isn't the enemy. Surrender is the enemy. Every time we give up, we lose a piece of something valuable. Maybe it's our confidence, our hope, our connections to others. These losses compound. Give up enough times, and eventually there's nothing left worth fighting for. Plo Koon saw this truth play out on a galactic scale. Worlds that surrendered to the separatists lost their freedom. Jedi who surrendered to the dark side lost their souls. But he also saw it in small, personal moments. A Padawan who gives up on a difficult technique never develops their full potential. A clone trooper who accepts that he's expendable never discovers his own worth. The wisdom here isn't about being tough or strong or brave. It's about understanding consequences. When you surrender to adversity, you're not just affecting yourself. You're affecting everyone who might have benefited from your perseverance. The techniques you might have mastered, the people you might have helped, the examples you might have set, all of that disappears. During a brutal battle where his forces were overwhelmed, Plo Koon kept searching for survivors long after others would have retreated. His troops asked why he risked so much for such small numbers. His response was simple: because if we stop looking, if we accept the loss, then we've decided those lives don't have value. And once you decide that, where does it stop? This philosophy extended to how he viewed the war itself. Many Jedi became hardened, accepting that casualties were inevitable, that suffering was just part of conflict. Plo Koon never accepted that. Every life lost was a failure to find a better way. Every battle was adversity that demanded not surrender, but creative solutions. When younger Jedi came to him, frustrated with their training, hitting walls they couldn't break through, he'd share this wisdom. The wall isn't telling you to stop. It's asking you to find another way. The adversity isn't your enemy. Your surrender would be. The tragedy is that Plo Koon's life ended during Order 66, when the clones he'd fought so hard to protect were forced to turn against him. But even in that moment, his philosophy held true. He didn't survive, but what he stood for did. Ahsoka lived because of his training. Countless beings survived because of battles he won by refusing to surrender. That's the deeper meaning of his words. Nothing of value would remain doesn't just mean physical things. It means ideals, principles, the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. Every time someone faces adversity and keeps going, they preserve these intangible treasures. Every time someone surrenders, a little more light goes out of the universe. The lesson for us is clear. When you're facing your own adversity, when everything seems impossible, Remember that your perseverance isn't just about you. It's about preserving something valuable for everyone who comes after. Your refusal to surrender today might inspire someone else's courage tomorrow. Your persistence through hardship proves that hardship doesn't have to win. Plo Koon believed that every act of perseverance added value to the universe, while every surrender diminished it. Simple math, really. Keep going, and something good remains. Give up, and something precious is lost forever. A young man tries to explain to the woman he loves why loving her doesn't break his sacred vows, and in doing so, he accidentally reveals the truth that would both destroy and save him. When Anakin speaks these words to Padme in Attack of the Clones, he's 19 years old and thinks he understands everything about being a Jedi. He was right about the love part. He just got confused about what kind of love he was talking about. Padme had been teasing him, saying Jedi aren't allowed to love. Anakin's response showed he'd actually been paying attention during those temple philosophy classes. Attachment is forbidden, possession is forbidden, but compassion, which I define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. So you might say we are encouraged to love. Listen to how carefully he breaks this down. He's not making excuses or finding loopholes. He's describing the actual foundation of Jedi philosophy. The problem wasn't that Anakin understood it wrong. The problem was that he understood it perfectly, but couldn't live it. Unconditional love means loving without expecting anything back. It means caring about someone's well-being, even if they never know you exist. It means wanting what's best for them, even if what's best doesn't include you. That's the love Jedi are supposed to feel for all living beings. That's compassion. Anakin showed this kind of love all the time during the Clone Wars. When his clone troopers were in danger, he'd risk everything to save them. Not because they were useful or because he'd get rewarded, but because he genuinely cared about their lives. When he found injured enemies, he'd often help them despite orders to leave them behind. When civilians were caught in crossfire, Anakin would abandon tactical advantages to protect them. That's the Anakin people loved. The hero who couldn't stand to see others suffer, who'd throw himself into impossible situations because someone needed help. He had more raw compassion than almost any Jedi of his generation. The Council saw it as a weakness, but it was actually his greatest strength. The trouble started when Anakin confused unconditional love with possessive attachment. See, unconditional love says, I want you to be happy. Attachment says, I want you to be happy with me. Unconditional love says, I'll help you become your best self. Attachment says, I need you to stay exactly as you are. Unconditional love accepts loss. Attachment fears it more than anything. When Anakin fell in love with Padme, he thought he was expressing the compassion he talked about. But listen to how he actually treated her. He got jealous when other men looked at her. He had nightmares about losing her and would do anything to prevent it. He loved her, absolutely, but it wasn't unconditional. It was desperate, possessive, terrified love that put his needs above hers. The same thing happened with his mother. His compassion for her was real, but it got twisted into attachment. When she passed, his love turned into rage. He didn't celebrate the life she'd lived or find peace in ending her suffering. He just wanted revenge. That's not unconditional love. That's ownership disguised as caring. But here's what makes Anakin's quote so powerful. He was right about compassion being central to a Jedi's life. Every great Jedi act comes from unconditional love. Obi-Wan raised Anakin out of compassion for a boy who needed guidance. Yoda trained generations of Jedi because he loved the light they'd bring to the galaxy. Qui-Gon fought to free Anakin because he couldn't bear to leave a child in distress. The Jedi Order sometimes forgot this truth. They became so afraid of attachment that they started fearing love itself. They told younglings to release all emotion, to feel nothing, to become distant and cold. But that's not what the code actually taught. It said to love everyone equally, not to love no one at all. Anakin instinctively understood that distinction, even if he couldn't always maintain it. When he trained Ahsoka, his compassion for her made him a great teacher. He protected her, guided her, believed in her. When she left the Order, he let her go. That letting go, that acceptance of her choice, even though it hurt him, that was unconditional love. The beautiful tragedy of Anakin's story is that compassion, the very thing he identified as central to being a Jedi, is what saved him in the end. When Luke stood before the Emperor, refusing to fight, choosing to believe in the good still buried in Vader's heart, he was showing pure, unconditional love. No conditions, no demands, just faith that his father could choose to be better. And Anakin responded to that love. After decades of being Vader, of believing love was weakness, of thinking compassion had died with Padme, he felt it again. Love for his son that asked nothing in return. Love that would sacrifice itself rather than cause harm. The unconditional love he'd described to Padme all those years ago finally made sense. In that moment, throwing the Emperor down the reactor shaft, Anakin proved his younger self right. Compassion is central to a Jedi's life. It's what separates them from the Sith. It's what makes their sacrifices meaningful. It's what brings light to darkness. The lesson for us is to examine our own love. Is it unconditional compassion that wants the best for others? Or is it possessive attachment that fears loss? Do we love people for who they are or for what they give us? Can we care without controlling, help without owning, love without demanding? Anakin gave us the answer when he was young and idealistic, before fear twisted his understanding. Compassion, unconditional love, is central to life. Not just Jedi life, but any life worth living. He forgot this truth for decades, but it never stopped being true. And when he remembered it, when he chose compassion over control, love over fear, he became the Jedi he was always meant to be. That's the gift hidden in Anakin's tragedy. He showed us both paths, the path of attachment that leads to suffering, and the path of compassion that leads to peace. He experienced both. And in the end, unconditional love won. It always does, if we give it the chance. A young Jedi stands over the captured Dark Lord who terrorized the galaxy, and she makes a choice that changes everything. Instead of ending the threat forever, Bastila Shan decides to try something that sounds impossible. She's going to save him. When she speaks these words in Knights of the Old Republic, she's not just talking about military protocol. She's describing the fundamental difference between Jedi and Sith. The Jedi do not believe in ending their prisoners. No one deserves execution, no matter what their crimes. This wasn't some naive idealism from someone who'd never seen real evil. Bastila had fought in the Jedi Civil War, watched entire worlds burn, seen what Darth Revan and his followers had done to the Republic. She had every reason to want revenge, every justification for making sure this particular threat never rose again. But that's exactly when mercy matters most. When you have complete power over someone who hurt you, when everyone would understand if you chose vengeance, when even the law might support the harshest punishment. That's when you discover who you really are. Bastila chose to be a Jedi. Think about what this meant practically. Revan wasn't just any enemy. He was the fallen Jedi who'd nearly destroyed the Republic, who'd turned countless Jedi to the dark side, who'd led armies that devastated entire star systems. The safe choice, the logical choice, maybe even the merciful choice for the galaxy would have been to end him. Instead, the Jedi Council, guided by Bastila's philosophy, tried something radical. They gave Revan a new identity, a fresh start, a chance to become the hero he was meant to be. It was risky, dangerous, some would say foolish. It was also the most Jedi thing they could have done. The power of Bastila's belief became clear when Revan, not knowing his true identity, became a force for good in the galaxy. He saved worlds, protected innocent people, fought against the very darkness he'd once served. The Dark Lord, who'd nearly destroyed everything, became the hero who saved everyone, all because someone believed he deserved a second chance. But here's where Bastila's philosophy gets really tested. She herself fell to the dark side during the war. Malak captured her, twisted her mind, turned her into his apprentice. She did terrible things under his influence, betrayed everything she'd stood for. By her own logic, by the mercy she'd shown Revan, she deserved the same chance at redemption. And she got it. Revan, the very person she'd saved, returned the favor. When he could have ended her threat, he chose to believe in her capacity to return to the light. He showed her the same mercy she'd once shown him. She came back, stronger and wiser for having experienced both sides. This is what Bastila understood that many miss. Mercy isn't weakness, it's strength. Anyone can destroy an enemy. Anyone can give in to anger and strike back. It takes real power to look at someone who's done terrible things and say, you can still choose to be better. The distinction between Jedi and Sith isn't about lightsaber colors or Force techniques. It's about this fundamental choice. Sith believe in domination, in might making right, in destroying anything that opposes them. Jedi believe in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility that even the darkest soul can find its way back to the light. During the war, Bastila's battle meditation ability could turn the tide of entire conflicts. She could inspire thousands of Republic soldiers while demoralizing their enemies. But her greatest victory wasn't on any battlefield. It was in that moment when she looked at a captured Dark Lord and chose mercy over vengeance. The ripple effects were enormous. Revan's redemption didn't just save him, it saved everyone he went on to help. It proved that the Jedi way, the path of mercy and compassion, could triumph over darkness. It showed that believing in redemption could literally save the galaxy. But Bastila's principle goes even deeper. No one deserves execution, no matter what their crimes. She's not saying people shouldn't face consequences or that justice doesn't matter. She's saying that taking a life, even a guilty life, diminishes everyone involved. It closes the door on any possibility of change, growth, redemption. Think about what this means for smaller conflicts. That person who betrayed your trust, who hurt you deeply, who seems beyond forgiveness. Bastila would say they still have the capacity to change. Not that you have to forget what they did or put yourself at risk, but that writing them off completely, declaring them irredeemable, that's choosing the dark side path. The Jedi way that Bastila championed says that as long as someone draws breath, they can choose differently. They can make amends, learn from mistakes, become someone better. Ending them removes that possibility forever. It's the ultimate expression of giving up on someone. When Bastila says the Jedi don't believe in executing prisoners, she's really saying the Jedi don't give up on people. They believe in the potential for good that exists in everyone, even those who've fallen furthest. It's not about being soft or naive. It's about understanding that redemption is always possible, and that possibility is worth protecting. This philosophy saved the galaxy in her time. Revan's redemption, made possible by Bastila's mercy, stopped a threat that military might alone could never have defeated. It proved that sometimes the best way to destroy an enemy is to turn them into an ally. The lesson extends beyond grand galactic conflicts. Every time we write someone off as irredeemable, every time we choose punishment over rehabilitation, every time we let vengeance guide our actions, we're choosing the easier path. Bastila challenges us to choose the harder one, to believe in people's capacity to change, to offer second chances even when they seem undeserved. That's what makes someone a true Jedi, or just a good person. Not perfection, not never making mistakes, but the commitment to mercy even when vengeance would be justified. The belief that redemption is possible even in the darkest circumstances. The courage to spare an enemy and risk them becoming an ally. Bastila lived this truth, fell from it, and returned to it. Her journey proves that mercy isn't just a philosophy. It's a practical approach that can transform the worst situations into opportunities for growth and healing. A Grand Master watches her Jedi Knights grow angrier with each battle, sees them celebrating victories with too much enthusiasm, notices how their mercy decreases as their power increases. Satele Shan has seen this pattern before in the stories of her ancestor Revan, and she knows exactly where it leads. When she speaks these words in the Old Republic era, she's not giving a philosophy lecture. She's trying to save her Jedi from becoming the very thing they swore to destroy. The dark side is insidious. That word, insidious, is perfect. It means something that creeps up on you, that seems harmless or even helpful at first. Satele understood that nobody wakes up and decides to become evil. It happens one justified anger at a time, one excused act of cruelty at a time, one righteous hatred at a time. During the war against the Sith Empire, Satele had every reason to hate. The Sith had destroyed Jedi temples, devastated peaceful worlds, committed acts that would make anyone's blood boil. Her own master had fallen in battle against them. Many of her friends were gone. The temptation to match their brutality with equal force must have been overwhelming. But Satele recognized the trap. When you fight monsters, you have to be careful not to become one. When your enemy uses cruelty and you respond with cruelty, you're not defeating them. You're joining them. You might wear different colors and fight for different sides, but the darkness doesn't care about your uniform. Think about how hate actually works. It starts small, seemingly justified. That person hurt you, so you hate them. Fair enough. But hate doesn't stay focused. It spreads. You hate them, then people like them, then people who remind you of them, then people who don't condemn them enough. Before you know it, hate has become your primary emotion, your default response to problems. Satele watched this happen to Jedi during the war. They'd start by hating the Sith, which seemed reasonable. Then they'd hate anyone who worked with the Sith. Then anyone who didn't fight hard enough against the Sith. Then anyone who suggested peace talks with the Sith. The hate kept expanding until some Jedi were barely distinguishable from their enemies in their methods and mindset. The really dangerous part is that hate feels powerful. When you're angry, when you let that rage flow through you, you feel stronger, more focused, more capable. That's the seduction of the dark side. It offers immediate power, immediate results, immediate satisfaction. But the cost is everything that makes you who you are. Satele knew the history of her ancestor Revan better than most. He'd been a Jedi hero who decided the only way to stop the Mandalorian threat was to match their aggression. He won the war but lost himself. By the time he defeated the Mandalorians, he'd become so accustomed to using dark methods that he couldn't stop. The hero became the villain, all because he thought he could use hate as a tool without being changed by it. This is what Satele meant by transformation. Hate doesn't just influence your actions. It rewrites who you are at a fundamental level. You start as someone fighting against evil. You end as someone who has become evil, just wearing a different mask. The methods become the identity. The temporary measure becomes the permanent state. During her time as Grand Master, Satele implemented strict protocols about emotional discipline during wartime. Not because emotions were bad, but because she understood how easily justified anger becomes unjustified cruelty. She taught her Jedi to win battles without celebrating destruction, to defeat enemies without relishing their defeat. Some younger Jedi thought she was being too soft, too cautious. They pointed out that the Sith weren't holding back, so why should the Jedi? Satele's response was always the same. Because if we don't hold back, if we match them hatred for hatred, then the Sith have already won. They've turned us into them. The wisdom here applies far beyond ancient galactic wars. Look at any conflict, personal or political, and you'll see this pattern. People start with legitimate grievances, real injustices that need addressing. But somewhere along the way, the fight against injustice becomes an excuse for cruelty. The oppressed become oppressors, the victims become perpetrators. The cycle continues. Satele's solution wasn't to avoid conflict or ignore injustice. She was a warrior, after all, one of the finest fighters of her generation. But she fought with discipline, with restraint, with constant awareness of who she was and who she wanted to remain. She checked her motives regularly. Was she fighting to protect or to punish? Was she motivated by love for the innocent or hatred for the guilty? These distinctions matter because they determine the outcome. When you fight from hatred, even if you win, you create more hatred. When you fight from compassion, even if you lose, you preserve something worth saving. Satele understood that the real victory wasn't defeating the Sith Empire. It was defeating them without becoming them. The insidious nature of the dark side means it often comes disguised as justice. That's why it's so dangerous. Nobody thinks they're becoming evil. They think they're fighting evil so effectively that normal rules don't apply. They think their hatred is special, justified, different from the bad kind of hatred. But hatred is hatred, and it transforms everyone the same way. Satele's legacy was maintaining the Jedi Order's principles during one of its darkest periods. While others advocated for matching Sith brutality, she held the line. She kept reminding her Jedi that their strength came not from anger, but from peace. Not from hatred, but from compassion. It was harder, It was slower, but it preserved who they were. The lesson for us is constant vigilance about our own motivations. When we're fighting something we believe is wrong, we have to regularly check whether we're becoming wrong ourselves. Are our methods consistent with our values? Are we creating the change we want to see, or are we just perpetuating the cycle with different players? Satele Shan's warning remains relevant because the temptation never goes away. In every generation, in every conflict, someone decides that this time hatred is justified, this time cruelty is necessary, this time becoming the monster is the only way to defeat the monster. And every time they prove Satele right. The hate transforms them into the very evil they thought they were fighting. Five clone cadets stand in the rain on Kamino, failing their training exercise for the third time, blaming each other for every mistake. They're about to be reassigned to maintenance duty, careers as soldiers over before they began. She tells them in the Clone Wars episode, "Clone cadets, exactly what they need to hear. You are where you need to be. Solve your problems as a whole, not as individuals." Domino Squad was a mess. 5 clones, genetically identical, trained identically, but somehow completely unable to work together. Heavy thought he could do everything himself. Echo followed rules so strictly he couldn't adapt. Fives questioned every order. Cut-Up made jokes when he should have been focusing. Droid Bait, well, kept getting shot by training droids. Their instructors wanted to wash them out. These cadets couldn't even complete a basic simulation. How could they survive actual combat? But Shaak Ti saw something others missed. Each clone's weakness was actually a strength being misapplied. They weren't bad soldiers. They were trying to be 5 individual soldiers instead of 1 unit. The first part of her statement, "You are where you need to be," addressed their constant complaints. Each clone thought he'd be better in a different squad, with different teammates, in different circumstances. They spent so much energy wishing things were different that they never dealt with things as they were. Shaak Ti understood something fundamental about life. You're never in the wrong place if you're learning what you need to learn. Those 5 clones needed each other specifically because they were so different. Heavy needed Echo's discipline. Echo needed Five's flexibility. They all needed Cut-Up's ability to stay loose under pressure. Even Droid Bait, constantly failing, taught them to watch out for each other. But the real wisdom came in the second part. Solve your problems as a whole, not as individuals. She wasn't just talking about military tactics. She was describing how any group of people can achieve something impossible when they stop competing and start collaborating. Watch how Shaak Ti herself lived this principle. During the Battle of Kamino, when the Separatists launched a massive assault on the cloning facilities, she didn't try to defend the entire planet alone. She coordinated with clone commanders, worked alongside regular troopers, integrated with defensive systems. She understood that one Jedi, no matter how powerful, was less effective than a unified force working together. The transformation in Domino Squad was immediate once they understood her message. In their final test, instead of 5 individuals trying to be heroes, they became one organism with 5 parts. Heavy's strength supported Echo's planning. Five's adaptability covered Cut-Up's distractions. They stopped leaving Droid Bait behind and started protecting him. They passed. Not because they suddenly became better soldiers, but because they finally became a squad. This lesson extends far beyond military training. Think about any group trying to accomplish something difficult. a family dealing with crisis, co-workers on a deadline, students on a group project. The instinct is always to divide tasks, to say you do your part and I'll do mine. But Shaak Ti's wisdom suggests something different. Don't divide the problem, unite against it. When she served on the Jedi Council, Shaak Ti practiced this philosophy constantly. While other council members might advocate for their own perspectives, she always looked for synthesis, for ways to combine different viewpoints into stronger solutions. She understood that 12 minds working separately were just 12 opinions, but 12 minds working together were wisdom. The phrase "you are where you need to be" carries special weight coming from a Jedi. It's not about fate or destiny in some mystical sense. It's about presence, about stopping the constant mental escape to somewhere else, sometime else, someone else. The problems in front of you, the people beside you, that's your reality. That's what you have to work with. During the Clone Wars, Shaak Ti was assigned to oversee clone training on Kamino. It wasn't a glorious battlefield position. She wasn't leading armies or negotiating treaties. She was watching training drills and reviewing combat scores. Many Jedi would have seen it as beneath them. Shaak Ti recognized she was exactly where she needed to be, shaping the future of the Republic's army one squad at a time. The clones under her guidance learned more than combat techniques. They learned that their strength came from unity, that their survival depended on each other, that 5 decent soldiers working together were better than 5 excellent soldiers working alone. This philosophy would save countless lives when those clones faced actual combat. But here's what makes Shaak Ti's teaching especially powerful. She wasn't asking the clones to lose their individuality. Heavy was still strong, Echo still disciplined, Fives still creative. She was asking them to contribute their individual strengths to a collective purpose, not to become the same, but to become whole. This is the opposite of what many organizations do. They try to sand down differences, make everyone conform to a standard, eliminate what makes people unique. Shaak Ti knew that diversity of thought and approach, when properly coordinated, created strength. A squad where everyone thinks the same way has 5 versions of the same blind spot. A squad with different perspectives can see problems from all angles. The practical application is straightforward but challenging. When facing a problem with others, resist the urge to handle your part and hope others handle theirs. Instead, step back and ask, how can we solve this together? What does each person bring that others don't? How can different strengths combine into something greater? Shaak Ti's calm presence during crisis showed this philosophy in action. When Kamino was under attack, when everything was chaos, she became the center that others could coordinate around. She didn't try to be everywhere. She was where she needed to be, doing what she could do, trusting others to fill the gaps. The lesson challenges our ego, our need to be the individual hero. It asks us to find victory in group success rather than personal glory. It requires the humility to admit we need others, and the wisdom to recognize that needing others isn't weakness, but strength. When Domino Squad finally succeeded, they didn't celebrate 5 individual victories. They celebrated one shared triumph. They'd learned that the solution to their problem wasn't becoming better individuals, but becoming better together. That's the truth Shaak Ti taught them, and it's a truth that applies whenever people must work together to overcome something bigger than themselves. A Jedi general watches pacifist villagers stand against war droids with nothing but their convictions, and she sees something her military training never taught her. When Aayla Secura speaks these words to Ahsoka in the Clone Wars episode Defenders of Peace, she's witnessing proof that battles aren't always won by whoever has the most weapons. The Lurmen were frustrating allies. Republic forces had crash-landed on their planet, bringing the war with them, and these villagers refused to fight. Not wouldn't fight, refused. Their leader insisted violence was wrong, even in self-defense. Most military commanders would have written them off as naive fools about to be destroyed. Aayla saw something different. Don't underestimate their resolve. A strong belief can be more powerful than any army. Coming from a Jedi general in the middle of a galaxy-wide war, these words carried special weight. Aayla had commanded clone battalions, led assaults on separatist strongholds, seen the devastating power of modern military technology. She knew what armies could do, but she also knew their limitations. An army can occupy territory, but it can't occupy minds. It can destroy bodies, but not ideas. It can force compliance, but not loyalty. The Lurmen understood this. Their pacifist beliefs weren't just philosophical positions. They were weapons of a different kind. Think about what the separatists wanted from the Lurmen: submission, resources, strategic position. But how do you conquer people who refuse to be conquered? How do you defeat those who won't acknowledge your victory? The Lurmen's absolute commitment to their principles created a problem that battle droids couldn't solve. Aayla had seen this pattern throughout history. The Republic itself was founded on belief, the conviction that free worlds working together were stronger than any empire. That belief sustained them through impossible odds. Every time a numerically superior force was defeated by determined resistance, it proved the same point. Conviction multiplies strength in ways that mathematics can't calculate. During the Clone Wars, Aayla lived this truth personally. She wasn't the strongest Jedi or the best fighter, but her belief in the Jedi Code, in protecting the innocent, in finding peaceful solutions whenever possible, that belief made her incredibly effective. It guided her decisions, sustained her through defeats, and inspired those who followed her. When young Ahsoka expressed frustration with the Lurmen's pacifism, Aayla offered perspective. These villagers weren't just being stubborn. They were demonstrating that there are things more important than survival. Their principles, their identity as a peaceful people, meant more to them than their lives. That kind of conviction creates its own form of power. The episode proved Aayla right in an unexpected way. The Lurmen didn't fight, but their unwavering stance forced others to act. The Jedi couldn't stand by and watch principled beings be destroyed. The clones found ways to defend the village without forcing the Lurmen to betray their beliefs. Even some Lurmen youth, inspired by their elders' courage, found non-violent ways to resist. This is the multiplication effect of strong belief. It doesn't just strengthen those who hold it. It inspires others, creates allies, forces everyone to examine their own convictions. The Lurmen's pacifism made the Jedi better protectors, made the clones more creative defenders, made everyone involved think harder about why they fought. Aayla understood this because she'd studied Jedi history. How many times had a single Jedi with unshakable belief changed the course of events? Not through superior firepower, but through the power of conviction. When people truly believe in something, when they're willing to stake everything on that belief, they become forces of nature. But here's the subtle part of Aayla's wisdom. She said a strong belief, not just any belief. The strength comes not from stubbornness, but from depth. The Lurmen's pacifism wasn't a casual preference. It was carved into their souls by generations of teaching and practice. They'd rather face extinction than betray it. That's the kind of belief that can stop armies. Throughout the war, Aayla saw the opposite too. Worlds that surrendered immediately. People who abandoned their principles at the first threat. Societies that had no belief strong enough to fight for. They had armies, weapons, defensive positions. What they lacked was conviction. They fell quickly and completely. The tragedy of Order 66 makes Aayla's words even more poignant. When the clones turned on her, she faced it with the same calm belief that had defined her life. She didn't understand what was happening, but her faith in the Force, in the righteousness of her path, remained unshaken to the end. Her belief couldn't save her life, but it preserved her legacy. The practical lesson here challenges how we think about strength. We tend to measure power in concrete terms: money, weapons, numbers, resources. Aayla reminds us that invisible forces can be more powerful. The belief of revolutionaries has toppled empires. The conviction of reformers has changed societies. The faith of individuals has moved mountains. When you feel overwhelmed by opposition, when the forces against you seem insurmountable, remember the Lurmen. They faced war machines with philosophy. They met violence with principle. They proved that a strong belief, deeply held and courageously maintained, can indeed be more powerful than any army. This doesn't mean belief alone is enough. The Lurmen survived because the Jedi protected them, because their conviction inspired others to act. But without that core belief, without that unwavering commitment to their principles, they would have been just another conquered world. Two Jedi who love each other stand at a crossroads, knowing they must choose between personal happiness and their duty to the galaxy. Siri, Tachi, and Obi-Wan Kenobi make the hardest decision of their lives, and in explaining it, Siri gives us perhaps the most beautiful description of love ever spoken by a Jedi. To love without wanting to possess or influence. To cherish without keeping. To have without holding. These aren't just pretty words. They're instructions for the impossible. A manual for caring about someone completely while letting them be completely free. Siri understood something most people never learn. The moment you try to own love, you destroy it. The moment you grasp it too tightly, it suffocates. Siri and Obi-Wan discovered their feelings for each other as young knights, working together on dangerous missions. The connection was real, powerful, mutual. In another life, they might have been together. But they were Jedi, and being Jedi meant understanding that personal desire couldn't override universal responsibility. The easy thing would have been to hide their relationship, to steal moments together while maintaining their duties. Plenty of Jedi had probably done exactly that over the millennia. But Siri and Obi-Wan recognized the trap. Secret love becomes possessive love. Hidden relationships breed fear of discovery, jealousy of time spent apart, the constant anxiety of loss. Instead, they chose something harder but cleaner. They acknowledged their love, honored it, then let it go. Not because they stopped caring, but because they cared too much to let their love become corrupted by attachment. Think about what Siri's words actually mean. To love without wanting to possess or influence. That's revolutionary. Most people think love means wanting to be with someone, wanting to shape their decisions, wanting to be the most important thing in their life. Siri says real love wants none of that. Real love wants the other person to be free, even if that freedom takes them away from you. This philosophy shaped how Siri lived her entire life. She was known for her fierce independence, her refusal to be controlled by anyone or anything. But that independence wasn't coldness. It was the same freedom she offered everyone else. She loved without chains, cared without conditions, gave without expecting returns. When she worked with other Jedi, she supported them completely, but never tried to change them. When she mentored younger knights, she guided without controlling. When she faced enemies, she fought to stop them, not to dominate them. Every relationship reflected her understanding that love and possession are opposites. The phrase "cherish without keeping" captures something profound about appreciation. You can treasure something, value it deeply, hold it sacred in your heart without needing to lock it away. Think of watching a sunset. You cherish the moment completely, but you don't try to stop the sun from setting. You don't rage against the night. You simply appreciate what is while it is. Siri cherished her friendship with Obi-Wan that way. Every mission together was precious precisely because she knew it might be the last. Every conversation mattered because she wasn't guaranteed another. The temporary nature didn't diminish the love, it intensified it. To have without holding might be the hardest part. It acknowledges that we can experience love, can feel that connection, can know that bond exists without needing to grasp it physically. The love between Siri and Obi-Wan didn't disappear when they chose duty over romance. They had it. They just didn't hold it. This teaching matters because possessive love destroys everything it touches. Look at what happened to Anakin when he couldn't follow this philosophy. His love for Padme became possession. His possession became fear. His fear became the very thing that destroyed her. He loved her, but he had to hold her, had to control her fate, had to influence her choices. That holding, that grasping, that desperate need to possess led directly to loss. Siri and Obi-Wan's path was different. Their love remained pure because they never tried to own it. Years later, when Siri fell in battle during the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan grieved deeply. But he didn't fall to darkness. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't let loss break him. The love they'd shared, freely given and freely released, had left him stronger, not weaker. The wisdom extends beyond romantic relationships. Think about how parents love children. The best parents love without wanting to possess, knowing their children must become their own people. They cherish without keeping, treasuring every moment while accepting that children grow up and away. They have without holding, experiencing the profound connection of family without treating children as property. Or consider friendship. The best friendships are those where both people are free to grow, change, even drift apart if life takes them different directions. Friends who try to possess each other, who demand exclusive loyalty, who can't accept change. Those friendships become prisons. Siri's words challenge the conventional understanding of love as something you get and keep. She suggests love is something you experience and release, something that flows through you rather than something you store up. It's the difference between trying to hold water in your fists and letting it flow through your fingers. One way leaves you frustrated and empty. The other way lets you feel the water's coolness, its movement, its life. The practical application is both simple and incredibly difficult. When you love someone, ask yourself if you're trying to possess or influence them. When you cherish something, notice if you're trying to keep it unchanged. When you have something precious, observe whether you're holding too tightly. Siri Tachi lived these words until her last day. She loved the Republic without trying to control it. She cherished the Jedi way without becoming rigid. She had profound connections without holding anyone hostage to them. Her death in battle was tragic, but her life was free, precisely because she understood that love and freedom are not opposites. They're partners. The lesson she left behind, these 3 phrases of impossible wisdom, offers a different way to love. Not the desperate, grasping love that fears loss and breeds darkness, but the open, generous love that accepts change and creates light. It's the kind of love that makes you stronger, not weaker. The kind that survives even death, because it was never dependent on possession in the first place. A young man stands at the edge of an impossible jump, his master's final words echoing in his head as stormtroopers close in behind him. Cal Kestis has 2 choices. Trust in what he can see, which is certain death, or trust in what he can't see, which might save him. When he whispers, "Trust only in the Force," and leaps into the void, he's not just escaping danger, he's choosing faith over fear. Throughout Jedi Fallen Order, these 3 words from Master Jaro Tapal become Cal's anchor in a galaxy that's trying to destroy him. They're simple words, but they carry the weight of everything a Jedi needs to survive when the whole universe turns against them. Cal didn't start out trusting anything. After Order 66, he'd spent years hiding on a scrap planet, cutting apart old starships, pretending the Force didn't exist. Every instinct he'd developed was about staying invisible, trusting only in his ability to remain hidden. The Force had gotten his master and friends eliminated. Why would he trust it now? But hiding hadn't made him safe. It had made him half dead, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. When his cover was blown and he had to run, Cal faced a choice. Keep trusting in his own ability to hide, which had already failed, or go back to his master's teaching. Trust only in the Force. Think about what this actually means in practical terms. When Cal approaches a chasm too wide to jump, trusting the Force means believing it will slow his fall. When he faces an enemy too powerful to defeat, trusting the Force means believing it will show him the way. When every logical option leads to failure, trusting the Force means taking the illogical path. Master Tapal hadn't just spoken these words, he'd demonstrated them in his final moments. Surrounded by clone troopers who'd turned against them, outgunned and outnumbered, Tapal trusted the Force to guide him in protecting young Cal. He couldn't save himself, but his trust ensured Cal's survival. The lesson was written in sacrifice. For Cal, learning to trust again was a gradual process. Each time he used his Force abilities after years of suppression, he was choosing trust over safety. Each time he followed a Force vision instead of running away, he was choosing trust over certainty. The game mechanics themselves reinforce this. Players must literally leap into empty space, trusting that Cal's Force abilities will activate. The most powerful example comes when Cal finds the holocron containing the locations of Force-sensitive children throughout the galaxy. This artifact could rebuild the Jedi Order. It's everything he's been working toward. But he realizes the Empire could use it to find and eliminate those same children. Logic says hide it. Fear says protect it. But the Force whispers something different. Cal destroys the holocron, trusting that these children's fates shouldn't be decided by anyone but themselves. He lets go of control, of plans, of the very mission that's been driving him. Trust only in the Force means sometimes the Force tells you to release what you think you need most. This philosophy saved Cal repeatedly. When he faced visions of his past trauma, trust in the Force helped him process the pain instead of being consumed by it. When he encountered Vader, an opponent he couldn't possibly defeat, trust in the Force showed him that survival, not victory, was the goal. Running wasn't cowardice, it was wisdom. The phrase "only in the Force" is crucial. Not trust in the Force plus your own strength. Not trust in the Force plus your allies. Not trust in the Force plus backup plans. Only the Force. This absolute trust strips away all the safety nets we usually rely on. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. Cal's journey from traumatized survivor to confident Jedi traces directly back to this teaching. Each act of trust built on the previous one. Trust the Force to catch you when you jump. Trust it to guide your lightsaber in battle. Trust it to show you visions that matter. Trust it to tell you when to fight and when to flee. Trust it even when it asks you to give up everything you've worked for. This isn't about becoming passive or fatalistic. Cal didn't sit around waiting for the Force to solve his problems. He acted, fought, struggled, chose. But underneath every action was the foundation of trust. Not trust that everything would work out perfectly, but trust that the Force would guide him toward what needed to happen. The wisdom applies beyond fictional Force powers. In real terms, it's about recognizing that we can't control everything through will alone. Sometimes we have to trust in something larger than our individual understanding. Call it intuition, call it faith, call it the universe's pattern. The principle remains. Excessive control breeds fear, while trust enables action. When Cal faces impossible situations, he doesn't waste energy calculating odds or lamenting unfairness. He centers himself, remembers his master's words, and acts from trust. This isn't blind faith. It's conscious choice to believe that following your deepest wisdom, your truest instincts, will lead you where you need to go. By the end of his journey, Cal has transformed from someone who trusted nothing to someone who trusts completely. Not because the galaxy became safer or because his enemies disappeared, but because he learned that trust itself is a form of strength. When you trust only in the Force, you stop wasting energy on what you can't control and focus entirely on what you can. The lesson Cal offers is profound. In our moments of greatest uncertainty, when every tangible support fails, when logic offers no solutions, we can choose trust. Not trust that we'll get what we want, but trust that we'll find what we need. Not trust that the path will be easy, but trust that it will be possible. Master Tapple's final teaching to his Padawan became more than survival advice. It became a philosophy of existence. Trust only in the Force. Let go of the illusion of control. Stop trying to force reality to match your expectations. Instead, align yourself with something greater and let it carry you forward. Cal Kestis lived this teaching through the darkest period in galactic history. He survived the Jedi Purge, faced his trauma, found his purpose, and chose wisdom over power. All because he learned to trust in something he couldn't see but could always feel. In times of chaos, that trust became his anchor. In times of doubt, it became his certainty. Trust only in the Force. Everything else follows from there. A Jedi Master touches an ancient wall and suddenly experiences 1,000 years of history in seconds. Quinlan Vos closes his eyes and the past becomes present. The hidden becomes visible. The impossible becomes clear. When Obi-Wan finds these words written on a wall in the TV series bearing his name, he's discovering the philosophy that kept one of the most unconventional Jedi from losing himself in darkness. Only when the eyes are closed can you truly see. This sounds backwards at first. We're taught from birth that seeing means using our eyes, that truth comes from observation, that facts are what we can verify visually. Quinlan Vos spent his entire life proving the opposite. The most important truths are invisible. The deepest understanding comes when we stop looking and start feeling. Quinlan had a gift called psychometry. He could touch objects and see their history, feel the emotions of everyone who'd handled them, experience memories that weren't his own. But here's the thing. This ability only worked when he closed his eyes. The moment he tried to use normal vision alongside his Force sight, everything got muddy. The physical world interfered with the deeper truth. This taught him something fundamental about perception. Our eyes are actually limitations. They show us surfaces, not substance. They reveal the present, not the pattern. They display what is, not what could be or what was or what truly matters. To really understand something, sometimes you have to stop looking at it. During the Clone Wars, Quinlan took this principle to extremes. He went undercover so deep that even the Jedi Council wasn't sure which side he was really on. He walked among criminals and Sith, let darkness touch him without consuming him, gathered intelligence that saved countless lives. How did he maintain his identity when surrounded by deception? He closed his eyes and trusted what he felt rather than what he saw. Think about how this actually works in practice. When Quinlan investigated crimes, he didn't just examine evidence visually like a detective. He'd close his eyes, touch objects at the scene, and experience what happened. While others were trying to piece together clues, he was reliving the event. His closed eyes saw more than their open ones ever could. But the teaching goes deeper than just using Force abilities. Quinlan understood that our physical senses often deceive us. A person can smile while planning betrayal. A situation can look safe while hiding danger. The obvious answer is frequently wrong. But when you close your eyes, when you shut out the distractions of the physical world, other senses activate. Intuition sharpens, patterns emerge, truth whispers. Obi-Wan found this quote at a crucial moment in his own journey, years after the Jedi Order fell. He was hiding on Tatooine, watching over Luke, doubting everything he'd believed in. The words reminded him that the Jedi way wasn't dead just because he couldn't see it anymore. Sometimes the most real things are the ones we can't see with our eyes. The practical wisdom here challenges how we navigate daily life. We're constantly bombarded with visual information, screens and images and surface-level appearances. We make judgments based on what people look like, how situations appear, what we can immediately observe. Quinlan's teaching suggests we're missing most of reality by relying so heavily on our eyes. When you close your eyes in meditation, you're not shutting out the world. You're opening to a different kind of perception. When you stop looking at a problem directly, sometimes the solution appears in your peripheral awareness. When you quit staring at what someone is showing you, you might sense what they're hiding. Quinlan's missions required him to see through deception constantly. Crime lords, Sith assassins, double agents, they all presented false faces to the world. If he'd trusted his eyes, he'd have been fooled every time. Instead, he'd close his eyes, reach out with the Force, and feel the truth beneath the lies. His blindness became his clearest sight. This technique saved his life repeatedly. When walking into traps, his eyes might see a normal room, but with them closed, he could feel the danger waiting. When talking to informants, their words might sound truthful, but with eyes shut, he could sense their real intentions. The darkness that nearly claimed him during his undercover work couldn't hide from the vision that came without sight. The lesson extends to any situation where surface appearances might deceive. A deal that looks perfect on paper might feel wrong when you close your eyes and sit with it. A person who seems trustworthy visually might trigger unease when you stop looking and start sensing. The path that appears easiest might reveal its true difficulty when examined with inner sight. Quinlan's way wasn't about rejecting the physical world or ignoring visual information. It was about recognizing that eyes show only one layer of truth, often the least important one. Real understanding comes from synthesis, from combining what we see with what we feel, what we observe with what we intuit. During his most dangerous mission, when Quinlan had to convince Count Dooku he'd truly turn to the dark side, he succeeded because he understood this principle perfectly. Dooku watched his every move, analyzed his every expression, tested him constantly. But Quinlan knew that as long as his inner truth remained hidden, as long as his real sight stayed closed to Dooku's observation, he could maintain his deception. The irony is perfect. To fool the Sith, who prided themselves on seeing through deception, Quinlan used the very principle he'd learned as a Jedi. Truth isn't what you can see. It's what you can feel when you stop trying to see. The Sith, obsessed with controlling the visible world, never understood this deeper level of perception. For us, Quinlan's teaching offers a different way of understanding. When confused, close your eyes and feel for truth. When overwhelmed by conflicting information, shut out the visual noise and listen to your inner knowing. When trying to understand someone or something deeply, stop analyzing what you can see and start sensing what you can't. This isn't mysticism or wishful thinking. It's recognition that humans have forms of perception beyond the visual, ways of knowing beyond the obvious. Quinlan Vos mastered these alternative senses and used them to navigate impossible situations. His words, found on a wall years after his time, continue to teach that sometimes the clearest vision comes in darkness. The deepest sight comes with eyes closed, and the greatest understanding comes when we stop trying to see and start trying to truly perceive. A 14-year-old kid stealing to survive on the streets of Lothal sees stormtroopers everywhere but keeps telling himself to mind his own business. Then Ezra Bridger meets a crew of rebels, and suddenly minding his own business doesn't feel like enough anymore. When he speaks these words throughout Star Wars Rebels, he's explaining why he can't be that kid who just looks out for himself anymore. The thing about Ezra is that he started out doing exactly what most people would do. He ran away. His parents were gone, taken by the Empire, and he survived by staying invisible. Don't get involved. Don't make yourself a target. Just get through another day. For years, that worked fine. Then he met Kanan and the Ghost Crew. They were doing something that made no sense to him at first. They were helping strangers, taking massive risks for people they didn't even know. When he asked why, the answer was simple. Because those people needed help. That's it. That's the whole reason. We have to stand up for people in need. We can't just run away. This became Ezra's truth, but he had to learn it the hard way. His first instinct was always to protect himself. When Wookiees were being forced to work in the spice mines, his initial thought was that it wasn't his problem. When farmers were losing their land to the Empire, he wondered why they didn't just leave. When people in his town were suffering, he figured they should handle it themselves. But watching the Ghost Crew changed his mind. They showed him that when you help someone, something happens to you too. You stop being afraid all the time. You stop feeling powerless. You start mattering in a way that just surviving never lets you matter. The biggest moment came when Ezra decided to broadcast a message to all of Lothal. The Empire controlled everything, all the news, all the communication. Speaking out against them was basically asking to get caught. Everyone told him not to do it. He did it anyway. He told his whole planet that they weren't alone, that people were fighting back, that hope wasn't gone. Was it dangerous? Absolutely. Did it put a target on his back? Definitely. But silence was killing his world faster than any broadcast could. That's when Ezra really understood what standing up meant. It's not about being brave or strong or special. It's about seeing someone who needs help and deciding that their need matters more than your comfort. It's about recognizing that if everyone runs away, nobody gets saved. Throughout Rebels, Ezra kept making this choice. When he found out about Luminara Unduli possibly being alive, he pushed to rescue her, even though it was probably a trap. When the people of Tarkin Town were being pushed around, he brought them food and supplies. When his own parents' story came to light, he learned they'd made the same choice he was making. They stood up when it would have been safer to stay quiet. The hardest test came with Grand Admiral Thrawn. This wasn't some regular Imperial officer. Thrawn was smart, patient, and absolutely ruthless. He turned Lothal into his personal project, squeezing the planet for everything it had. Fighting him seemed impossible. Ezra found a way, but it cost him everything. He realized that these space creatures called Purrgil could be the key to removing Thrawn permanently. So he made a plan. When the moment came, he grabbed Thrawn and let the Purrgil take them both away into deep space. He removed himself from everyone he cared about to save them. Lothal stayed free after that. The Empire never came back. One teenager's choice to stand up instead of run away saved an entire planet. But here's what matters about Ezra's philosophy. Even if it hadn't worked, the standing up itself would have been the point. When you run away from people who need help, you're not just abandoning them. You're deciding that safety matters more than doing what's right. Ezra learned that's not really living, it's just existing. And existing while others suffer around you isn't freedom. It's just a nicer kind of cage. The wisdom in Ezra's words is pretty straightforward. We all see problems in the world. We all know people who need help. The question is whether we do something about it or whether we tell ourselves it's not our responsibility. Ezra's saying we have to do something, not because we'll win, but because running away makes us smaller. Think about it this way. Every time Ezra helped someone, he got stronger, not just in the Force, but as a person. Every time he stood up instead of running, he became more of who he was supposed to be. That's the real lesson. Standing up for others isn't just about them. It's about deciding what kind of person you want to be. By the time Ezra made his final sacrifice, he'd transformed completely. The scared kid stealing to survive had become someone who could save a world. Not through some special power or destiny, but through the simple choice to help when help was needed. To stand up when standing up was dangerous. To stay when running would have been smarter. An ancient Jedi master sits down thousands of years ago to write the words that will guide generations of peacekeepers, and he includes one line that changes how an entire galaxy thinks about mortality. When Odan-Urr wrote the Jedi Code, he gave us 5 simple statements. The last one sounds impossible until you really understand what he meant. There is no death. There is the Force. Most beings in the galaxy fear the end of life more than anything else. They spend their whole existence running from it, fighting against it, doing whatever they can to delay it. Odan-Urr and the Jedi who followed his code took a completely different approach. They said the thing everyone fears most doesn't actually exist, not in the way we think it does. This wasn't some feel-good philosophy meant to make people feel better. It was a practical understanding of how the Force works. Everything that lives is connected to the Force. When physical bodies stop working, that connection doesn't disappear. It transforms. The energy that was you returns to the greater energy that connects all living things. Think about what this meant for Jedi in practice. When they went into dangerous situations, they weren't paralyzed by fear of what might happen to them. When they lost friends in battle, they didn't collapse in despair. When they faced their own final moments, they met them with calm acceptance, not because they didn't value life, but because they understood life differently. Odan-Urr himself demonstrated this perfectly. He lived for centuries, studying the Force, teaching younger Jedi, building the foundations of the Order. When Plo Koon's dark forces came for him, Odan-Urr didn't panic or rage against his fate. He simply became one with the Force, transforming from physical teacher to spiritual guide in a single peaceful moment. The line appears simple, but it revolutionized how Jedi approached everything. Without fear of personal extinction, they could make choices based on what was right rather than what was safe. They could sacrifice themselves for others knowing they weren't really ending, just changing form. They could face the scariest opponents without terror clouding their judgment. Obi-Wan understood this deeply when he faced Vader on the Death Star. He lowered his lightsaber and let Vader strike because he knew something Vader didn't. Becoming one with the Force wouldn't weaken him. It would free him to guide Luke in ways a physical mentor never could. His famous words about becoming more powerful than Vader could imagine came straight from Odan-Urr's ancient teaching. Yoda taught the same principle to Luke, though he used different words. Those who transform into the Force shouldn't be mourned or missed. They're not gone. They've rejoined the energy that surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. The sadness we feel is for ourselves, not for them. The practical impact of this belief shaped every aspect of Jedi life. They didn't build elaborate tombs or monuments to fallen comrades. They didn't spend years in mourning. They acknowledged loss, honored memory, then continued forward knowing their friends were still part of the force that guided them. Even Anakin, in his darkest moments as Vader, couldn't escape this truth. When he finally understood it at the end of his life, when he saved Luke and destroyed the Emperor, he found peace. He appeared as a Force spirit alongside Yoda and Obi-Wan, proving that even someone who'd fallen so far could return to the Force's unity. This teaching asks us to think about existence differently. We usually see life as a brief flash of consciousness between two eternities of nothing. Odan-Urr suggests we're always part of something larger, temporarily focused into individual form, but never truly separate from the whole. Physical forms are like waves on an ocean. They rise, they fall, but they're always water. The comfort this brings in times of loss is real. When someone passes, the Jedi Code says they haven't disappeared. They've returned to the Force that connects all of us. The energy that was them is still present, just distributed differently. We can't see them or talk to them in the same way, but the connection remains. For Jedi facing danger, this belief became strength. They could walk into impossible situations not because they wanted to end, but because they didn't fear ending. They knew that whatever happened, they would continue as part of the Force. This freed them to focus entirely on their mission rather than their survival. Some Jedi learned to maintain consciousness even after physical transformation. Qui-Gon discovered this path, taught it to Yoda and Obi-Wan. They proved Odan-Urr's teaching literally true. There really is no death for those who understand the Force deeply enough. There's just a change in how they exist. But even for those who don't become Force ghosts, the principle holds. The Force is energy, and energy doesn't disappear. It transforms. Every living thing that's ever existed is still part of the Force, still contributing to the connection between all life. In that sense, nothing ever really ends. It just changes shape. Odan-Urr gave the Jedi this understanding thousands of years ago, and it sustained them through countless challenges. Wars, betrayals, the rise and fall of governments, even the near extinction of their order. Through it all, they held to this truth. There is no death, there is the Force. When we face our own fears about mortality, whether our own or others, this ancient wisdom offers a different perspective. Not denial of loss or false cheerfulness about endings, but a deeper understanding of what ending means. If we're all part of something larger that continues forever, then ending is just another kind of beginning. The Jedi Code's final line isn't about ignoring death or pretending it doesn't matter. It's about understanding death as transformation rather than termination. It's about recognizing that the Force, the energy that connects all life, is eternal. And if we're part of that Force, then in the most important way, so are we. An ancient Jedi master watches a teenage Padawan chase a thief through the Coruscant underworld, and she's talking non-stop the entire time. When Tera Sinube tells Ahsoka to be more quiet in the Clone Wars episode Lightsaber Lost, she immediately stops talking. The old master just smiles and shakes his head. That's not the kind of quiet he meant. Not quiet with your mouth, quiet with your mind. This gentle correction from one of the oldest Jedi alive contains more wisdom than most entire philosophy books. Sinube wasn't concerned about the noise Ahsoka was making with her voice. He was worried about the noise she was making in her head. All that mental chatter was drowning out everything she actually needed to hear. Think about how most of us go through life. Our minds are constantly racing. What we need to do next, what we should have done differently, what might go wrong, what someone meant when they said that thing. It's like having a dozen conversations happening in your head at once. No wonder we miss what's right in front of us. Ahsoka was doing exactly this when they were tracking down her stolen lightsaber. She was thinking about how embarrassing it was to lose her weapon, worrying about what Anakin would say, planning 17 different ways to catch the thief. Her mind was so loud she couldn't notice the obvious clues around her. Sinube moved differently. Despite being older and slower than almost any Jedi, he was one of the best investigators in the Order. Not because he was physically impressive or had special powers, but because his mind was quiet. While everyone else was mentally shouting, he was mentally listening. Watch how he worked that case. Ahsoka wanted to run everywhere, check every lead immediately, chase down every possibility. Sinube sat still. He thought, he observed. His body might have been moving slowly, but his perception was moving at light speed because it wasn't fighting through mental static. When they finally tracked the thief to a specific location, Ahsoka wanted to rush in. Her mind was full of plans and backup plans and contingency plans. Sinube just walked in calmly, mind quiet, ready to respond to whatever actually happened rather than what he imagined might happen. The difference was dramatic. Ahsoka's mental noise made her miss important details. She didn't notice the thief's partner. She didn't see the trap being set. She was so busy thinking about catching the criminal that she almost got caught herself. Meanwhile, Sinube, moving at grandfather speed, saw everything because his quiet mind could actually process what his senses were telling him. This principle shaped everything about how Sinube lived. In Jedi Council meetings, while others debated loudly, he sat quietly and often saw solutions everyone else missed. During investigations, while younger Jedi ran around frantically, he moved deliberately and solved cases through patience and perception. The lesson hit Ahsoka hard. She'd always equated being a good Jedi with being fast, active, constantly doing something. Sinube showed her that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Not nothing externally, but nothing internally. Stop the mental commentary. Stop the constant analysis. Just be present and aware. When Ahsoka finally caught her mental noise and let it settle, everything changed. She started noticing things. The way people moved, the patterns in the chaos, the connections between seemingly random events. Her lightsaber recovery went from a frantic chase to a strategic operation, all because she learned to quiet her mind. The practical application goes way beyond Jedi training. Ever notice how your best ideas come in the shower or right before sleep? That's because those are the few times our minds naturally quiet down. The mental noise stops for a moment, and suddenly clarity arrives. Sinube understood that a quiet mind isn't an empty mind. It's a clear mind. Like a pond that's been stirred up, you can't see anything through murky water. But let it settle, let it become still, and suddenly you can see all the way to the bottom. Our thoughts are the same way. When they're churning constantly, we can't see past them. When they quiet, we can see everything. This is why meditation exists in virtually every culture. It's not about achieving some mystical state. It's about turning down the mental volume so you can actually hear what's going on. The Force speaks constantly, Sinube would say, but it whispers. If your mind is shouting, you'll never hear it. For Ahsoka, this lesson changed how she approached everything. In future missions, you could see her taking those Sinube moments, stopping, breathing, letting her mind settle before making decisions. She became less reactive and more responsive, less frantic and more focused. The beautiful thing about Sinube's teaching is how simple it is. You don't need special training or abilities. You just need to notice when your mind is being loud and choose to let it quiet down. Not forcing silence, just allowing it. Like turning down a radio that's been blaring so long you forgot it was on. In our daily lives, this wisdom translates directly. That problem you're trying to solve? Stop thinking about it so hard and let your mind quiet. The solution might already be there, just drowned out by mental noise. That person you're trying to understand? Stop analyzing everything they say and just listen with a quiet mind. You might hear what they're really communicating. Sinube lived to be one of the oldest Jedi in the Order, solving problems others couldn't crack, teaching lessons others couldn't convey, not through special powers or secret knowledge, but through the simple practice of keeping his mind quiet enough to perceive what was actually happening. His gift to Ahsoka, and through her to us, was this understanding. The noise in your head isn't helping you think. It's preventing you from seeing. Quiet with your mouth is easy. Anyone can stop talking. Quiet with your mind is the real challenge and the real power. Master it, and like old Tera Sinube, you'll see solutions where others see only problems, find paths where others find only obstacles, and hear wisdom where others hear only noise. A Jedi Master stands at the edge of the galaxy's frontier and broadcasts a message that will echo through space for centuries. When Avar Kriss speaks these words at the Starlight Beacon dedication during the High Republic era, she's not just making a speech, she's making a promise to every living being who can hear her voice. The Starlight Beacon was supposed to be a symbol, a massive space station on the edge of known space, showing that the Republic and the Jedi hadn't forgotten about the frontier worlds. But Avar Kriss understood it needed to be more than just a building. It needed to be a promise that nobody was truly alone. Whenever you feel alone, whenever darkness closes in, hear our signal and know that the Force is with you. Think about what those words meant to someone on a distant world, barely connected to the rest of the galaxy. Maybe they're facing raiders or natural disasters or just the crushing isolation of being so far from help. Then this message arrives, carried across the stars, telling them that someone cares, someone's watching, someone will come if they call. Avar Kriss wasn't just saying nice words. She lived this promise every single day. She had this incredible ability to sense what other Jedi called the Song of the Force. She could feel the connections between living beings like notes in a melody. When crisis hit, she could literally link the minds of multiple Jedi together, turning them into one coordinated force for good. During the Great Hyperspace Disaster, when ships were being thrown out of hyperspace and crashing into planets, Avar used this ability to save millions. She connected dozens of Jedi across multiple star systems, letting them work as one mind to prevent catastrophe. She was the signal in the darkness, the thread that held everything together when chaos tried to tear it apart. The phrase, "for light and life," became the motto of the High Republic Jedi. It wasn't just a catchy slogan, it was a mission statement. Everything they did was for bringing light to dark places and protecting life wherever they found it. Not some lives, not important lives, not lives that could pay for protection. All life, everywhere. This is our covenant. That word, covenant, matters. It's stronger than a promise. It's a sacred vow, something that can't be broken without losing who you are. Avar was telling the galaxy that the Jedi weren't just helpers when it was convenient. They were bound by something deeper to be there when needed. The practical impact was immediate. Frontier worlds that had been dealing with problems alone suddenly had hope. Traders started taking routes they'd been too scared to travel. Colonies expanded into dangerous regions because they knew that signal from starlight meant backup existed. The promise created courage just by being spoken. But Avar's message went deeper than just physical help. "The Force is with you," she said. "Not the Jedi will come save you, though they would try." She was reminding everyone that the Force connects all living things, even in the loneliest corner of space, on the darkest night. In the worst situation, you're still part of something larger. You're still connected. During the Nihil attacks, when these space raiders brought Tera to the frontier, Avar's promise was tested constantly. The Nihil were smart, brutal, unpredictable. They made people feel alone and helpless on purpose. But every time they struck, that signal from Starlight Beacon reminded victims that they hadn't been abandoned. Avar herself demonstrated this during the Battle of Kur. When a Nihil fleet attacked a peaceful moon, she didn't just send ships. She reached out through the Force and connected with the defenders, letting them feel that they weren't fighting alone. She turned their fear into determination by proving the promise was real. The tragedy came when Starlight Beacon eventually fell. The Nihil found a way to destroy it, and the great symbol of hope crashed into a planet. Avar barely survived. The beacon was gone, the signal silenced. It seemed like the promise had been broken. But here's what the Nihil didn't understand. The promise wasn't about the station. It was about the commitment behind it. Even with Starlight destroyed, Jedi like Avar kept broadcasting hope. They kept showing up when darkness closed in. They kept proving that the Force connected everyone, that nobody was truly alone. The wisdom in Avar's words applies to any time, any place. We all have moments when we feel isolated, when problems seem too big, when darkness feels overwhelming. Her message reminds us that connection exists even when we can't see it. Help exists even when we can't reach it immediately. We're part of something larger than our individual struggles. Think about what it means to be someone else's signal in the dark. You might not have force powers or a space station, but you can still be the person who reminds others they're not alone. You can be the voice that says keep going when someone wants to give up. You can be proof that the promise of connection is real for light and life. 4 words that summarize everything worth fighting for. Not for power or control or victory, but for the light that pushes back darkness and the life that deserves protection. When Avar broadcast these words, she was telling the galaxy what the Jedi stood for at their best. Years after Starlight fell, people still remembered Avar's message. Parents taught it to children. Communities repeated it during hard times. It became more than a Jedi promise. It became a reminder that in the vastness of space and life, connection and hope persist. The lesson Avar Kriss gave us is simple but powerful. When you're the one in darkness, remember that signals of hope exist even if you can't hear them yet. When you're the one with light, remember to broadcast it to those who need to see it. Either way, know that the Force, that connection between all living things, means you're never as alone as you might feel. This is the promise. This is the covenant. Not just for Jedi, not just for that galaxy, but for anyone who chooses to believe that light and life matter more than darkness and fear. Avar Kriss stood at the edge of known space and declared that nobody would face the dark alone. Even when her beacon fell, her promise endured, for light and life. A woman watches criminals attack her husband and take his life, and in that moment, she has to make a choice that will define the rest of her existence. Nomi Sunrider fought back and stopped the attackers, but the victory felt like defeat. She'd used violence, taken lives, become the very thing she'd always avoided. From that day forward, she made a vow that would shape one of the most legendary Jedi careers in ancient history. I will not be ruled by fear or vengeance. This wasn't a line from some grand speech. It was a promise Nomi made to herself in the quiet moments after tragedy. She could have let that terrible day turn her into someone consumed by anger. Instead, she chose to let it teach her the most important lesson of her life. Fear and vengeance are rulers that destroy everything they touch. Nomi hadn't wanted to be a Jedi. She was content with her quiet life until violence forced her onto a different path. When she finally sought training on Ambria, she did something that shocked her teachers. She refused to build a lightsaber, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't trust herself with one yet. She was that afraid of what she might do if she held a weapon while anger still lived in her heart. Think about that level of self-awareness. Most people who experience trauma want to feel powerful again as quickly as possible. They want weapons, protection, the ability to strike back. Nomi understood that getting stronger while still ruled by fear or vengeance just makes you dangerous in the wrong way. During the Great Sith War, Nomi's resolve was tested over and over. The Sith Empire brought destruction everywhere it touched. Friends fell in battle. Innocent worlds burned. Her closest ally, Ulic Qel-Droma, turned to the dark side and became one of the enemy's greatest weapons. She had every excuse to let hatred guide her actions. She chose differently. While other Jedi called for Ulic's execution when he was finally captured, Nomi looked at her fallen friend and saw someone who could still be saved. She used her powers not to punish him, but to cut him off from the Force temporarily, giving him space to remember who he used to be. It was an act of mercy that nobody understood at the time. The decision changed everything. Ulic, stripped of his powers and forced to confront what he'd become, found his way back to the light. He became crucial in defeating the Sith, providing intelligence and eventually sacrificing himself to stop his former master. None of that would have happened if Nomi had chosen vengeance over mercy. This is the power of her principle. When you refuse to be ruled by fear or vengeance, you break cycles that seem unbreakable. Violence creates more violence. Revenge breeds more revenge. Fear spreads like a disease. But mercy, even when it seems foolish, can transform enemies into allies and end conflicts that seemed eternal. Nomi became one of the greatest Jedi leaders, not because she was the strongest fighter or the most powerful Force user. She led because people trusted her to make decisions based on wisdom rather than emotion. When everyone else was ready to strike back in anger, she was the voice asking whether there was another way. During one battle, Sith forces had devastated a Jedi stronghold. The survivors wanted immediate retaliation. They had targets, They had the means, they just needed permission. Nomi refused. She knew that striking back in anger would just create more grieving families, more people seeking revenge. Instead, she focused on defense and protection, saving lives rather than taking them. The other Jedi thought she was being weak. Then they noticed something interesting. The Sith started making mistakes. Without the cycle of retaliation feeding their dark side powers, they became less coordinated, less effective. Nomi's refusal to give in to vengeance literally weakened her enemies more than any attack could have. Her influence extended beyond military strategy. Young Jedi who trained under her learned to examine their motivations constantly. Were they acting from compassion or anger? Were their choices driven by wisdom or fear? She taught them that the moment you let negative emotions make your decisions, you've already lost the real battle. The testament to Nomi's philosophy came years after the war. Former enemies sought her out for guidance. Worlds that had been devastated rebuilt with her help. The peace that followed wasn't just an absence of fighting, it was genuine healing, possible only because someone had chosen to stop the cycle of vengeance. Think about what this means practically. Everyone faces moments when fear or the desire for revenge feels overwhelming. Someone hurts us, and we want to hurt them back. Something scares us, and we want to destroy it. Nomi's life shows that these impulses, while natural, don't have to rule us. She didn't ignore her emotions or pretend they didn't exist. She felt fear. She felt anger. She wanted revenge for what had been taken from her. But she refused to let those feelings make her choices. She acknowledged them, processed them, then chose to act from her principles rather than her pain. The legacy of this approach shaped the Jedi Order for generations. When faced with enemies, they remembered Nomi's example. When tempted by revenge, they recalled how her mercy had saved more lives than any weapon. When fear threatened to control them, they knew it could be acknowledged without being obeyed. For us, Nomi's vow offers a different way to handle conflict and trauma. It doesn't mean being passive or accepting injustice. It means choosing our response based on who we want to be rather than what we're feeling in the moment. It means recognizing that fear and vengeance are temporary emotions that make permanent mistakes. I will not be ruled by fear or vengeance. It sounds simple, but living it requires constant vigilance. Every day brings opportunities to choose fear or courage, revenge or mercy, reaction or response. Nomi Sunrider proved that consistently choosing the harder, higher path doesn't just change your own life. It can change the fate of entire civilizations. Her story reminds us that the worst things that happen to us don't have to define us. We can experience tragedy without becoming tragic. We can face enemies without becoming like them. We can know fear and anger without being ruled by them. That choice, made daily and deliberately, is what separates those who perpetuate cycles of violence from those who end them.